guys, welcome to week 3 of our online learning. I know we were kind of all hoping to be back this week, but of course we know we need to keep being safe and healthy. I hope you guys are all safe and healthy. So I hope you're enjoying this beautiful weekend. It's been gorgeous, so I thought I'd try to do a video outside here. This is my backyard, so thought I'd share it with you guys. So I just wanted to kind of review a little bit what we did last week and then look ahead to this week. So we're getting close to the start of World War II. Remember, at the end of World War I, the League of Nations was formed. Now, it did not have a whole lot of power, if you remember. One, because the United States didn't join it. Secondly, because they really had no power to enforce any of the decisions that were made. And we're going to see that really come into play as we have several nations that are going to become aggressive. Not just Germany, but other nations are also going to become aggressive and really ignore the League of Nations here in the 1930s in particular. So first we're going to look at Japan. So Japan's emperor had pretty much become basically just a figurehead at the end of World War I, and there was a civilian government that controlled Japan. However, a young emperor in the 1920s named Hirohito is going to want to have more power. He's going to start to ally himself with the military, and he's going to strengthen his power and just wait for his chance to really take over running Japan again. That happens in the 1930s. The civilian government collapses, and Hirohito takes charge and really begins his aggressive campaign to establish what he calls a new order for Japan. They need more natural resources, so his goal was basically to take over the rest of Southeast Asia and parts of China as well. So he begins to do that. He actually invades Manchuria. The Chinese have been in the middle of a civil war between communist faction led by Mao Zedong and the conservative forces led by Chiang Kai-shek. So those two have been fighting, which has weakened China a lot. Now, just as Japan starts to invade, they decide to lay aside their differences and join together to try to fight against Japan as they invade, but there's not enough strength there in China to really stand up against the Japanese. So the Japanese take over Manchuria and several other important Chinese cities, and then of course start to spread out to the rest of Southeast Asia as well. The League of Nations does very little to stop Japan. Actually, when it starts to put sanctions on Japan, Japan just says, well, if you're going to put sanctions on me, we're just going to leave. So they do that. They just leave the League of Nations. And so the League of Nations really had little power, again, to stop Japanese aggression. Another nation that's going to start acting aggressively is Italy. Italy, of course, is led by Mussolini. And after World War I, they were pretty disappointed in what they got or what they didn't get as a result of the Versailles Treaty. They really wanted land. And so Mussolini sets his eyes on Ethiopia. He wants to set up a new Roman Empire, and so he heads towards Ethiopia. They easily conquer Ethiopia. The Ethiopians had very primitive weapons, bows and arrows, things like that, and of course the Italians had much more advanced guns and weaponry, so they're easily able to take over Ethiopia. The League of Nations basically just puts some sanctions on Italy, but doesn't really put any barriers from Italy getting access to oil and other things that it would need to fuel its weaponry. So the sanctions did very little to stop Italy. Italy also takes over Albania, right? And then we've also got Germany. Of course, Hitler's goal is to create the Third Reich. He wanted to follow the line of the previous German empires. We had the First Reich, of course, with Otto the Great, when the Holy Roman Empire was established, and then we had Otto von Bismarck, Otto von Bismarck, when he unified Germany. That was the Second Reich. And now Hitler, of course, wants to establish this Third Reich that, in his eyes, would reign for 1,000 years. He also wants to create Lebensraum, which is living space for the German people. So his goal is to take over other areas that contain German-speaking people, as well as more land. He has his eyes set on, of course, parts of Russia, parts of Austria, and Czechoslovakia as well, to create living space for the German people. So first things he does is he pulls out of the League of Nations, and he pulls out of the Geneva Disarmament Conference. So again, the League of Nations, we're going to see, has very little power to stop Hitler. It does very little to stop him. The second thing he does is he's going to march right into the Rhineland. The Rhineland, of course, was a demilitarized zone after World War I. He's basically going to march right in. France is angry but does nothing. The League of Nations does nothing. So he basically just takes it over. So that was on March 7th, 1936. Now, up until this point, the rest of Europe is trying to diplomatically isolate Hitler. They had been pretty much France, Great Britain, and even Italy, because Mussolini at this point was not, in the early 30s, was not friends with Hitler. So they were kind of working together. Mussolini had actually stopped Hitler from invading Austria at one point. And so I believe that was in 1934. So Hitler is pretty diplomatically isolated. However, that's going to change as Mussolini starts to see that Hitler's ideas are similar to his. They're going to start to work together, and they're going to form some alliances. So Germany's going to form an alliance with Italy called the Rome-Berlin Axis, and that's of course where we get the name Axis powers from. And then Japan is going to join in on that in the Anti-Comintern Pact, which essentially was, in name, was against communism, particularly Russia, but really it was aimed at Russia, not just communism everywhere. It's particularly against Russia. So those three nations, Italy, Germany, and Japan, are going to form the Axis powers in World War II, but they've already formed alliances even before World War II starts. We have the Spanish Civil War that's going to happen in 1936 as well, where Francisco Franco is trying to gain power there. That's going to become a dress rehearsal for World War II, particularly for Italy and Germany. They're going to support Franco because he's fascist, Francisco Franco, nice alliteration there. So they're going to give him weapons, and it kind of helps the Italians and the Germans try out some of their new weapons, which is going to give them an advantage at the beginning of World War II. All right, Germany's going to also not just stop at the Rhineland. Hitler has his eyes set on the Sudetenland, which is part of Czechoslovakia. It's a part of Czechoslovakia that's very rich in resources, but it also has a lot of German-speaking people. And so Hitler basically tells the leader of Czechoslovakia, these are all German-speaking people, they should be a part of the German Empire. The leader of Czechoslovakia says no. The League of Nations is really reluctant to do anything. One, because they're, again, trying to keep him isolated. However, France and Great Britain both have kind of adopted this idea of appeasement with Hitler. They thought, well, if we just give in to him a little bit, he'll eventually stop and he'll have all that he wants and stop taking over more land. That doesn't work too well, but you're going to see them follow this policy of appeasement here in the mid to late 1930s. They did that with the Rhineland. They basically said, okay, Hitler, you have the Rhineland. And then as this conflict between Germany and Czechoslovakia starts to build up over the Sudetenland, Mussolini is going to call a conference in Munich. And basically it's going to be Mussolini, Chamberlain from Great Britain, and Ladierre from France. And they are going to meet together and basically say, okay, Hitler, you can have the Sudetenland, but that's it. Let's just have the Sudetenland. It has German-speaking people anyway. They didn't even talk to the Czechoslovakian leader. They basically just gave part of Czechoslovakia away to Germany without even consulting the leader of Czechoslovakia. But that was their policy of appeasement. They thought, well, if we just give him the Sudetenland, he'll stop, and that will be enough. However, a few years later, he is going to, of course, march into the rest of Czechoslovakia and take the rest of Czechoslovakia as well. Even before the Sudetenland, I forgot to mention, he actually marched into Austria as well. Austria had a weak government, and basically he forces them to put a Nazi in as chancellor. And of course, when a Nazi party member becomes chancellor, he basically invites Hitler to come in and take over Austria. So there we've got that direct violation of the Versailles Treaty, where they were not supposed to, or Germany and Austria were not supposed to join politically. And here we see that happening in the 1930s. So that's going to happen. So we've got Hitler's taken over the Rhineland, he's taken over Austria, and then he's taken part of Czechoslovakia, he's taken the Sudetenland, and then eventually he's going to take over the rest of Czechoslovakia. And at that point, that's when France and Great Britain realize that Hitler is not going to be stopped by appeasement. And so they make a decision after Hitler takes over the rest of Czechoslovakia to use force against Hitler if he starts to invade any other parts of Europe. And we're going to, of course, see that happen fairly soon. Just a side note with Czechoslovakia, throughout World War II, Hitler, basically he made an agreement with the Slovakians, and Slovakia became an independent republic that was Nazi influenced, so basically controlled by the Nazis within Czechoslovakia. The Czechs, Hitler's going to persecute, and he's going to send a lot of them, over 250,000 of them, to concentration camps. Mostly they're intellectuals and they're highly educated people. He's going to just wipe out in his concentration camps. So again, another people group that Hitler attacked other than the Jews as well. All right, that is going to pretty much bring us up to the end of where we left off last week. This week we're going to look at the beginning of World War II and where Hitler invaded first, and see what France and Great Britain do as a result. So there is a review quiz posted on Edmodo. You may use last week's notes as you take the quiz. So it is an open note quiz from using last week's fill in the blank notes. So use that as you take the quiz. That's going to be posted on Edmodo. I'm also going to post another PowerPoint and fill in the blank notes that I need you to complete as well, and send that to me by midnight Monday. All right, thank you guys. I hope you have a great week. Bye.